All right, so let's start with lecture 2 on multivibrators. So, in the previous lecture, now we talked about how we need memory because of the eventual sequential logic that makes up the internals of every computing device that we have today, no? And to create that memory, we made some sort of bistable circuit that has two stable states with which we can associate a 0 and a 1, no? And because of that, we could use it for memory. Now, we would like to now discuss the larger class of circuits that these cross-coupled inverters are part of. No, we call these regenerative circuits. No, this is because the circuits like these, no, do not need inputs. Rather, they use their outputs to regenerate their own inputs so that they don't actually need an input to function. Rather, what the input does is it actually just affects the state of the circuit, but it doesn't have to permanently stay there. No? So, regenerative circuits are sorted into three. We have bistable, monostable, and astable regenerative circuit. No? So, this terminology is based off of the known states, no, that are stable of the regenerative circuit. So we have the cross-coupled inverter, which was bistable. We have a monostable regenerative circuit, which has one stable state, and the astable regenerative circuit, which does not have a stable state, and in fact, it oscillates between a few stable states. Okay? So, multivibrators, in a loose sense, can be considered two-state timing electronic circuits. No, so this specifies the useful part of multivibrators. That is, they typically only have or designed to have only two states. They can be used to generate pulses for logic circuits. This is what they're typically used for. No, and the important thing is we can implement it with either transistors or op amps. No, so the cross-coupled inverter pair we've discussed before is an example of a bistable multivibrator because it's stable in a state that has 1 at the left and 0 at the right, or 0 at the left and 1 at the right. No? So, let's discuss a rudimentary version of a bistable multivibrator. No? So, this still does a cross-coupled inverter pair, but we have a coupling resistance between the collectors. Okay? So this bistable multivibrator has two stable states. It can be switched from one state to the other by applying a triggering circuit, by applying a triggering input or a switch, which we'll talk about later. And this can be used as memory circuits. No? So let's see how these stable states work. So let's say, for example, that Q1 was off. All right. So then, if Q1 was off, then this voltage at the top should be nearly VCC, right? Then, this flows into the base of Q2, essentially turning it on, no? So this would become 0.8. On means deep in saturation for the purposes of switches. So then this becomes 0.2 at the collector. And so we have a stable state because this being 0.2 means that this cannot be above 0.8, right? And in fact, there is no base current, so this becomes 0.2 exactly as well, which means this configuration is stable, right? Now, you can repeat this analysis yourself by assuming first that Q2 is off and Q1 is on, and you'll find that the state makes sense. So there are two stable states possible based on the initial assumption of which one is on or off. Okay? So, if we, on the other hand, no, assume, sorry, And okay, so we're not going to analyze the other part, no? So the question is, no, when we're designing some sort of bistable multivibrator, we want to ask if there are any component constraints, no? Because we want to design it, right? So what should I choose RC and RB to be? Well, to be bistable, no, or to be a bistable multivibrator that is properly designed, no, we want to ensure that the switches are working as switches. So then, when Q2 is saturated, Q1 is in cutoff, and when Q1 is cut off, Q2 has to be saturated. These are your two stable states. Okay? So, when we say that Q2 is saturated, no, this is the same as saying this, no? So when we say 1, then IB2 has to be greater than IC2, no? So this thing has to be greater than IC2 over beta, right? So then, okay, expanding the equations, IB2 is in fact equal to VCC minus VBE sat, this is VBE sat, no? Over RC plus RB, no? Well, that's this entire thing, no? Then that must be greater than VCC minus VCE sat, that's here, no? VCC minus VCE sat over RC times beta min. So this is VCC minus VCE sat over RC divided by beta, and that would be the forward active beta base current, no? So manipulating the equations, and we find that beta min is restricted to above RC plus RB divided by RC, no? So this means that the higher RB is, no, the higher you choose RB to be, the higher beta has to be, right? So if RB was 100 times RC, then the beta min is 100, and so on and so forth, no? And additionally, no, there are also some problems with this bistable circuit. So for example, even if you design this properly, no, beta can change with voltage or biasing. We saw this in the previous lecture, no, where we had a table where beta min actually changes as we um change IC, right? And note, we are not guaranteed a stable IC as we start the circuit up. If you just powered up the circuit, IC goes from 0 up to some sort of nominal voltage. So it doesn't start at beta equals 100, for example. No, it starts at somewhere else, right? So you don't know what betas the circuit can cycle through. No, so what's the problem with that? The beta, we used it to calculate the stability of the saturation and cutoff feedback mechanism. So then, if, for example, the circuit found a beta that puts it solidly within forward active, such that the state is stable in a forward active state, no? This is only possible if the gain becomes less than 1, the beta is very low. Then you find a stable state that is just one stable state during startup, and then you're doomed, right? Because it's no longer a bistable multivibrator as opposed to this one. This one is what's supposed to happen if the beta was working properly, right? So you can get stuck in some sort of stable state, no? So to prevent this from happening, no, we don't try to buy transistors that have very stable beta. Rather, we try to work with what we have. By introducing a fixed bias, a negative VBB, a fixed negative bias, no, we can use voltage dividers on the bases. So what happens is that between R1 and R2, right, you have the voltage at the base. So then, for example, if this was 0.2, no, and this was something very negative, then VB will be also negative, no? This guarantees that this guy will be very, very deep into cutoff regardless of beta. So, this circuit is guaranteed to have one transistor off. If one transistor is off, this is always guaranteed to be VCC, which makes sure this one is on. right? So this solves the metastable or the monostable problem, no? But it requires a negative supply. Okay. Now, for the next part, no, we also have an emitter coupled bistable multivibrator. So we get this by simply removing, no, kanina naka-ground to, simply removing those ground ports and instead adding a single RE to couple both of the emitters together. Okay? So now what happens is that it makes it harder to turn one side on when the other is off. No? Which makes the circuit more bistable. Bakit? Because now you have some sort of VE that is above ground. If this VE is above ground, no, then it's harder to turn this on because VBE, you need a higher VB to turn it on, right? So then, what happens is that it's actually harder to turn one side on. Because, for example, if this side was on and you're trying to turn this side on by charging this portion up, no? So this side is off, by the way. We're trying to turn it on. So we need to turn it on, we need to raise this voltage up. But then the target voltage is no longer just 0.8 or VBE sat. We need to target 0.8 plus VE, right? Because this is already high, right? It's high because this current is flowing through from Q1, no? As we know, this causes a high power dissipation as well, no? In fact, this is not just an emitter coupled bistable multivibrator. This is something known as a Schmitt trigger circuit, no? And we can use this for other applications as well, no? So you can look into that yourself. So, now that we know the implications and the topologies of bistable circuits, no, let's try to search for the bistable triggering mechanisms. How do we turn one state into the other manually if they're so stable? So, first type, we have asymmetrical triggering. This is when we have two pulses. We can either set to make sure it's in one state or reset to put it into the other state. No? So, basically, putting in two of the same pulse will not change the state. Rather, you need to pulse the other to make it so that, so this is the S state, and then because we pulse the other one, we put it into the reset state. Okay? For symmetrical triggering, now you only have one trigger. So what happens is that whenever we trigger, no, we get a change in state. No? So for example, we have Q, now we have Q prime. Right? And then we trigger again, and we get Q again. Okay? So, for example, in symmetrical triggering, to add symmetrical triggering, no, so we have the base circuit right here, and we add two diodes, an RX and the capacitance, and then the actual input. Okay? So, anong ginagawa nung, first off, let's talk about ano yung ginagawa ng capacitance. So, what does the capacitance do? Well, when we trigger a pulse, like it's really just a spike, no? So when we put in a pulse that is a spike into the capacitor lets the spike through, right? So the spike is now here, right? And saan naman pupunta yung spike ngayon, no? This is what the diodes are for. No, the diodes are called steering diodes, no, not inverters. There are steering diodes, no? So because they're steering diodes, what they do is they steer the pulse towards the transistor that actually needs it. So for example, if this was off, no, and this was on, then this one is high, right? This has a high voltage, and this one has a low voltage, right? Because it's off, and then that one is on, right? So saan pupunta yung pulse? Well, the pulse will try to go to the lower voltage because this one is closer to forward bias. This is heavily reverse biased. This is forward biased. So then the pulse will get here, right? But wait, this was off. But yeah, the pulse went there. So now it turns it on. Because it turns on, this thing drops down to 0.2, which turns this into as well 0.2. No? Something very low, which turns it into cut off, turning this into VCC, and now it's permanently on. Alright? So that's what symmetrical triggering does. So, okay. So, when designing a bistable multivibrator, we first try to specify the specs again, right? What are the supply voltages that are available? Typically, this has something to do with the application you're trying to make the bistable multivibrator for. You don't just make a bistable multivibrator because you want to use it, because you want one, right? So we take note of the required supply voltage, the load, no, both depend on the application and the type of transistor, no. Now, the components can be set as symmetrical, no, in a bistable multivibrator because we typically use it as memory circuit. We don't use it for timing, no. Next, we want to think of how fast do we want to trigger. That is, when we have two trigger spikes close together, how far away are they at minimum, right? Depending on that, we may have to think about how fast the components are, what are the parasitic capacitances around the transistors, no? But we didn't cover that. Next, we have when with designing the bistable, no, this is the saturation condition that we derive, right? Beta has to be greater than RC plus RB over RC, or else we won't be able to enforce that one side is saturated when the other is cut off. Okay? So, the next type of multivibrator is called the astable multivibrator. That is, it's a free-running multivibrator. It doesn't stop changing states. It has no stable state, rather it just has two quasi-stable states. No? That is fake stable. It's not actually stable. It just looks stable like this, no? It should look stable but it's not. No? Then there is no trigger circuit needed because it's self-triggering. It has a continuous output. It doesn't need you to tell it when to change, no? And if the circuit is symmetric, this becomes a square wave generator. So here it's asymmetric, but if the circuit has the same components on both sides, these two will be the same width. So then it's a square wave generator of 50% duty cycle, no? So, first, let's talk about the collector-coupled astable multivibrator. So, in this setup, each transistor has a resistance RB, and each base is collector-coupled to the collector of the other transistor. Capacitor-coupled. So, we have resistance, base resistance, and then it's collector-coupled. Base resistance, and then it's collector-coupled. No? So, we take the output at the collector of either transistor. And note, no, the desired behavior is that the astable multivibrator outputs square waves of specific duty cycle. No? So, just to compare, this is what the bistable looked like earlier, and this is what the astable looks like. No? Because of the presence of the capacitors, there is an element of timing in when the circuit switches state. Okay? Other note is that RB, instead of coupling the collectors together, it is now fixed biasing one of the sides. And the thing that couples the sides together is the capacitor. Okay? So, let's try to model the quasi-stable state to be able to take advantage of the behaviors of an astable multivibrator. Okay? So, we design each fixed bias half, no, RB and RC. You know how to do this from 131. You design the fixed biased half such that it is saturated without the capacitor. No? Then, let's try to figure out the circuit's behavior. Okay? So, we have a 4-step game plan for this. So, first, we try to find out ano ba yung voltages ng capacitors just before Q2 turns on and Q1 turns off, no? So, first we assume that this is on and this is off, and then at the time instant that we start analyzing, it turns this side turns off and this side turns on, no? So, first we want to know what these capacitor charges are as our initial state. Next, we turn t equals 0 plus, and then we calculate VBE2 as a function of time, no? This one. In order to find out when it actually turns on. Okay? Like when it turns back on again. Okay? So, first, we have to model the quasi-stable state. So, number one, we want to find out what the capacitor charges are just before Q2 turns off and Q1 turns on. No? So, baliktad. So, first, we need to know the initial value, final value, and the time constant for VBE2 for t greater than 0. So, initially, at t equals 0 minus, no, Q2 was on and Q1 was off. So, if Q1 is off, this has to be VCC, right? If Q2 was on, then this has to be VCE set, which is something like 0.2, right? And this also has to be 0.8. So, for the relevant voltages, this has to be VCC minus 0.8 for C2, and C1 is 0.2 minus VCC, right? But the value of C1 is not important at the moment, okay? Because these are strongly driven nodes around it, okay? So next, we use that value to calculate VBE2 because we need an initial and a final value, right? So Q1 has just turned on now, and we need to calculate VBE2. Okay? So after this turns on, this snaps to 0.8, this snaps to 0.2, and this snaps to VCC. Okay? Now, this one, no, through C2 becomes 0.2, or this one, no? So we'll calculate this in the next page. So here it is, no? So since we know that this is 0.2, 0.8, and VCC, we know the initial value of the C2 capacitor, right? It has a VCC minus 0.8 voltage across it. So 0.2 minus VC2 initial, no, equals VBE2 initial. And this turns out to be 1 minus VCC. Okay? Now, using our 1, 2, 3 lessons in order to figure out the actual time function, we have VBE2 equals VCC plus minus 2 VCC plus 1 e to the time t over tau. Okay? So, how do we find out tau? Let's analyze that. So, C2, in fact, charges through RB2. So, this is it. Right? And there is no other place for it to get current. Can't get current from here. That's cut off. Right? And this one is a strongly driven node. It's basically a current source that says 0.2 because that's an on transistor. It can source and sink any amount of current. Right? So, effectively, it's just RB2, C2. Okay? Next. All right, using VBE2 of t, we find out when does Q2 actually turn back on again, no? Like it was before t equals 0. So, for VBE2, for Q2 to turn on, VBE2 must eventually reach VBE sat, right? So then, okay, 0.8 has to be equal to VBE2 of t. And that t turns out to be this expression, which has an ln, okay? So, this ln, we can use that to formalize the idea of the pulse width of a stable multivibrator. Okay? So, we find that T2 turns back on from the last time that it was on, right? So, it turns on again after this amount of time, no? And if we increase VCC a lot, such that it's much greater than 1 and 0.8, we can simplify the expression to 2 VCC divided by VCC, which approximately equals just 0.693 times RB2C2. Okay? And this is valid if VCC is very high. No? Now, lastly, we repeat the analysis for the other quasi-stable state. No? So it's all just symmetric, no, to what we did earlier. So we find out, okay, VBE of T1 just before T1, we find this is also about negative VCC plus 1. It tries to charge up to VCC, and the time constant instead is RB1 C1. Okay? Which gives us the pulse width at Q1 collector would be RB1 C1 L, and this, which would also be approximated by 0.693 RB1 C1. So finally, we have these. No? So we have the pulse width, duty cycle, and frequency of the stable multivibrator. So we have a formula for pulse width 2, which is the time it takes for Q2, no, to go from on to off to on again, right? So for example, here, it was on, then it turned off, then it turned on again. And the time between the two on states is the pulse width 2. Okay? Next is the pulse width 1, which is an analogous state. It's the time that it was off before it turned on again, right? Which is pulse width 1. So the overall behavior of the circuit, the frequency would be 1 over the period, which is pulse width 1 plus pulse width 2. And this is the frequency of our stable multivibrator, no? The duty cycle would then be the ratio between pulse width 1 and the total pulse width. Okay? So, as a just to show you, no, we also have this simulated a stable waveform. So, what does the charging transient look like? So, as we discussed, no, at the start, VCE2 is equal to 0 and VCE1 equals VDD. No? You see, at t equals 0, di ba? Magsa-snap down si VB2, no? To about 1 minus VCC. Right? We know that. Then, okay, so this. Then it slowly charges up until it reaches 0.8. Right? When it reaches 0.8, no, VCE1, or rather, VCE2 snaps down to the on state, which means it goes down to VCE2 sat. It's like 0.2. No? And then, while that happens, no, this is now at 1 minus VCC, and it starts charging up to 0.8 again. And when it reaches 0.8, this time, ang magto-turn on naman is yung other side. No? And so on and so forth, right? This is just the accompanying waveform of the analysis we did earlier. Okay? So, when designing an stable multivibrator to meet these specific specs, no, we want to always begin with the specs, right? So, we want to specify the output frequency, the duty cycle, the supply voltage, and what load we have. Okay? So, for example, we want to design a circuit that dims a lamp to half brightness. Okay? And we have a rated operating current of 2 milliamps. Okay? We set the lamp as RC2. So, ito yung lamp daw. Okay? So, we want the 2 milliamps here. Okay? The frequency has to be 1 kilohertz. No, it doesn't have to be. That's arbitrary. But it has to be fast enough not to be visible by the naked eye. No, so that it dims to half brightness. And then since half brightness, we want the pulse width to be 50%. Okay? Now, the components, let's use a component that we found in the lab, no, which has beta min of 50, VBE sat of 0.7, and VCE sat of 0.2. Okay? So, since we have all of the specs already, we can start designing. Okay? So for Q2 to be saturated, IB has to be greater than IC sat. No? So this is the formula for IB for this circuit. That's VCC minus VBE sat over RB1. No? This is IC sat. This is IC sat. Okay? Parang baliktad yata. Pero, no? So, if VCC is greater than VBE on, is much greater than, so we can simplify this. We can just remove these from the equation. And we get that VCC over RB1, no? Which is VCC over beta min over RC2, beta min times RC2, no? We find that beta min has to be, beta min times RC2 has to be greater than RB1. Okay? Next. Okay? So, if we let RB1 be equal to RB2, that is both sides are actually symmetric, no? For the 50% duty cycle, we find that RC2 can be designed to be 5 kilo ohms. Okay? So, if the lamp was here and it has a very low resistance, then this has to be at least 5 kilo ohms. Okay? And since beta min times RC2 has to be greater than or equal to RB1, then we find that RB1 has to be 250 kilo ohms. And this enforces that the circuit remains in saturation for each side. Okay? Now, correction lang, we need to say that this is RB2. Okay? So that is all RB2. Okay? Because this is the this is the IB that we have to work with. Okay? So, that is it. So then confirming, we find that the period, half of the period is RB1C1 times 0.69. Okay? So, if the period is 1 kilohertz, then this 1 becomes 1 millisecond dapat, right? Then half of that is 500 microseconds. Okay? So 500 microseconds equals this. Then we manipulate the equation to get finally 3 nanofarads for the capacitor value. And since we are symmetric, this has to be also, C2 also has to be 50 3 nanofarads. All right? So with that ends lecture